Welcome to Confidence Bites. Start your week the confident way with short, juicy confidence takeaways brought to you by Stuart Elliott from Double C Coaching. Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Confidence Bites. And today I'm really honored to have a top executive coach with me, Hilary Potts from the HAP Group. And Hilary, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Stuart, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So let me just tell people a little bit more about you. You know, you've got quite an interesting history, and you've seen a lot, done a lot, and learned a lot and helped a lot of people. So Hilary is the founder of the HAP Group, a consulting firm dedicated to transforming businesses through leadership. As a leadership strategist, Hilary is sought after by senior leaders to navigate today's intensely competitive world with success. She advises some of the world's most prominent organizations and is recognized for her ability to quickly size up the business, people, and the environment to create strategies that turn delicate, complex situations into successful outcomes. Long after her formal consulting engagements are complete, her clients call upon her for advice and guidance. She is the author of the Executive Transition Playbook, Strategies for Starting Strong, Staying Focused, and Succeeding in Your New Leadership Role. Hilary's forthcoming book, The Truth About Change, How to Show Up and Make Things Happen, inspires leaders to lead themselves and others to take action. And prior to founding the HAP Group, Hilary served as CEO and president of CLG, Continuous Learning Group, a global leader in behavior-based performance management, consulting in addition to Hilary's role as a partner, working with top Fortune 100 companies. She served on the board for 8 years and held a succession of leadership positions. And Hilary started her career at Union Carbide, where she held a variety of sales and business management positions across the Fortune 500 company. And Hilary has earned her BS and MS in chemical engineering from Clarkson University. Clarkson University. And when Hilary isn't assisting leaders and their organizations, she lives in Middlebury, CT. Is that Connecticut?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, CT, where she spends time with her husband and 2 sons cycling, golfing, and hiking. So if you want to learn more about how Hilary works with clients, you can visit www.hilarypotts.com. And I will put the link on the transcript for that as well, don't worry. So Hilary, you had a lot of experience and you've done a lot and you've helped a lot of people. And, you know, one of the things that I'm very interested in is confidence, and how people can manifest or build confidence in themselves, and how confidence affects their behavior, their performance, etc., etc. So one of my questions I always think about is confidence a spoken word amongst the top leadership of companies, or is it sort of a hidden thing, but it is a problem, but people don't talk about it so much per se?
So I think from leaders to their organizations, they may not directly use the word confidence, but it's something that behind the scenes, they're probably talking to their mentors, their coaches, their advisors, and they may not necessarily use the word, I need to build confidence, but they may say, I need to get ready, I need to get prepared. How am I going to show up? And I feel that confidence is one of those things that can be learned. And we probably should be talking about more, because there are some steps you can take to build a confidence. And I think there's a difference between being confident and being able to step in and be present and aware of what you need to do and how to take action, and being what many people see as overconfidence and arrogance. And so I think there really is a difference. So I wish sometimes that leaders would say more about confidence. They don't use the word specifically, but it is something I think that's back in their psyche as they're preparing. Am I in my comfort zone, or am I stepping out of my comfort zone, and how am I going to handle that?
Yeah, and I think that sometimes in my experience, I've spoken to people and worked with people who there's a lack of confidence, but they're not maybe outwardly admitting it, and it tends to lead towards procrastination. Is that something that you found has been an issue as well?
Yeah, I think what can happen is you think about business, many times the leader gets to decide kind of the direction and where the organization's
Hmm.
heading. And so they've had a chance to kind of understand and become aware of the situation and figure out if they're going to go left or they're going to go right or they're going to go forward. And so by the
Hmm.
time the leader actually starts communicating that direction, they communicate it from a point of strength, of power, or for what we would call confidence. Now, you're
Hmm.
the organization, the direct reports, the associates, you're now hearing about that direction. And what happens is you really don't have a chance to process because what does the leader say? Let's go. Get on the bus. You don't want to miss this bus or train. We're all heading out of the
Hmm.
station. But what people don't talk about is that transition period that the leader had, that time to transition, that they worked behind the scenes to build their quote unquote confidence. They may have even procrastinated as they're trying to figure out what's the right way to go. Whereas now the associates have to kind of get on the bus in a hurry, and that kind of can take people off their game. So
Hmm.
we see the lack of confidence in things of inaction. So the people are kind of waiting. And so are they waiting because they're procrastinating or they really aren't too sure or understand where the direction is? They may not really know what skills or do they have the skills and they don't know what the next steps to take action. So that's one thing we see people procrastinating. On the other end of the perspective, which I'm seeing a lot more of, is because we want to have so much action, people are not really thinking through the direction and they're just stepping into things without really building a plan so they can confidently move into the next steps and actually get the results they're looking for. So there's two
Hmm.
sides. There's the inaction side and then there's the overaction side that's a bunch of activity that just exhausts us.
Yeah, and that bunch of activity isn't really effective, is it?
No, it's not. It's almost it's the instead of ready, aim, fire, you're actually out firing and exhausting yourself
Hmm.
unless you take that information in and say, okay, what did I learn from that? But that typically doesn't happen.
And you do a lot with change management, don't you, or change itself within companies? I think that's one of your specialities.
It is. So one of my specialties over the last 3 decades is really around how do leaders lead change? How do organizations affect change? And what are the behaviors or the actions people need to do? And what reinforcement do they need to have in order to move forward? So when you think about a change, you're stepping out of your comfort zone. Something is going to be different. You're going from a normal state of how things are working and to a new state. And that transition period takes people off balance. And so I
Yeah.
spend a fair amount of time with leaders and in preparing themselves on how they're going to show up and lead the change and how they're going to help others. Because if we're really going to go from point A to point B, something is going to change. We're out of our comfort zone, which then to me, the C of comfort zone and you're out of it means you need to move into something to build your confidence so you can step
Yeah.
into the new way with a power and strength.
Yeah, I mean, change, I've heard many people say, is one of our biggest fears, as a human being. We don't like change. We like to keep everything as is because we're comfortable with it. And you're talking about stepping out of the comfort zone. So how do you help leaders to find the confidence to do this, to break new ground, to find out all these new directions without stagnating or without sparking the fight or flight response?
So I think it's first figure out what direction you're going to take, because I think with a
Hmm.
direction, you know where you're veering off from, and so knowing where you want to go and the purpose of why. Uh, Adults like to know why. It's not just the what we're doing, but why we're doing it, and why is it important to do that right now. The first thing I typically hear when someone wants to initiate a change is they want to know what the result's going to be. Like when we get there, what is it going to look like? Are we going to have
Hmm.
advanced, or is it going to, again, be a bunch of activity that isn't going to get us where we want to go? So having a purpose and a direction is important. and then having a plan to carry that out. People like to know the steps along the way so that they don't get lost. It's almost kind of like E.T. when he was putting the various Reese's Pieces or the M&Ms down so they didn't get lost, so they could find their way back just in case that wasn't the right direction. I think also in building confidence is you need to understand the situation. You need to build some facts around you. You know, where are you and where you want to go, and keep checking that. And what I find is we move off too quickly, and we don't really have a full understanding and a plan. Because the other thing that I think is the fear is people are afraid of what? They're afraid to fail. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to do the activities within the time frame, that they're going to do it wrong, and in this day and age, people are worried about their jobs. So it's one aspect we're saying this is a good idea for the company. Let's move. Let's get new actions to get results. And at the same time, people are afraid of, well, what happens if I do it incorrectly?
Yeah, and I was laughing then because it just came to mind that a lot of people will hold back because their only focus is their job, and they're not working with the company. They're working for themselves in isolation, and that becomes a big issue as well, doesn't it? And that's probably because they haven't got the confidence that they're performing well enough.
Well, so that's right. And so what I think there's two things with comfort zone. There's the comfort zone that we get the adrenaline rush because we've chosen to step into the new way. And that's uncomfortable, but you can use your adrenaline for a positive piece. What I also find is with companies is sometimes they wait too long and then the results aren't there and they have to they hit rock bottom. The numbers aren't operating and now we have to take drastic measures. That's a harder way to step out of your comfort zone because now you're doing it kind of from the bottom versus from a choice point. And so what I really like to help leaders realize is we are constantly changing. What we were doing yesterday, we're not necessarily doing today. And if we really want to keep evolving and improving, we're going to have to grow. So getting comfortable with change is important. And part of that is to build the confidence to keep stepping out of your comfort zone and trying something new and creating the environment so people can test things in and mitigate those risks that cause the failure, create the safe zones that people then can step into action.
So what do you see as the biggest challenges or disadvantages when a leader doesn't have the confidence to put the plans into action to lead the change that's necessary? What how does it manifest itself, do you think?
So it either manifests itself as internal. You think about the internal piece is what's the self-talk inside? Because chances are a change means that someone's going to do something different. It is going to be uncomfortable, and you can feel the sensation of all of a sudden your confidence, as we call it, being put into question in your own body. Your breath changes. It may get a little bit more shallow. It may get quick. Your heartbeat may go up. Those are all signs that say, aha, something's going to be different. Now, am I going to step into that in a way, taking a nice deep breath, having very positive talk, thinking about what I'm going to do and then acting? Or is it going to stop me in my tracks, as you mentioned, the procrastination and say, aha, my hands are sweaty, my heart's beating a little fast. I'm going to ignore this right now. I'm going to go back to kind of a normal state. So I think there's those choice points that we don't really recognize necessarily and acknowledge inside. And again, in the business world today, you wouldn't look at your business partner and say, oh, by the way, my heart's kind of, it's racing rapidly. I'm uncomfortable. And maybe we should start to say that because you say, hey, what is that telling us?
Yeah, and one of the things that comes to mind quickly then is, with change, we're scared of the unknown. But what we need to realize is that we've faced these things before and we've survived, we've thrived, we've made it work. So if we have that knowledge, that can help to propel us away from the procrastination and into the unknown.
I like to call it a Leica. So chances are you have experienced this before, whether it was
Hmm.
in school, in college, in life, in another business project, and how have you handled it? And you probably, when you started assessing it, your self-talk is telling you some things that you didn't do well. But I would urge people to start to that self-talk of what did work. When
Yeah.
you did get to that situation, what did you learn? What would you like to do again? And those things that you didn't do so well, reframe them from a negative into a positive. So I didn't like the way that I showed up because I was um, procrastinating. This time, what I'm going to
Hmm.
do is I'm going to catch myself, and every time I step back and say, "Hey, I'm going to wait till tomorrow," say what small actions. So there's this learning that we can do in our internal coaching ourselves, which is something I think that leaders have learned to do. That they don't maybe say it, but they have the self-talk that is constantly coaching them to move forward. And when they
Hmm.
aren't moving forward, they have the experience to go either learn something themselves or to reach out to other people and say, "Hey, how did you do that?
Hmm.
How does that work?" So they seek many mentors and their direct reports and other people for those insights. And again,
And I think that's an important factor, that they do seek the mentors, the direct reports, etc. Because you can't do everything on your own, and a leader who tries to do everything on their own is not usually very successful.
no, it's not. And that's why we call it an organization. A leader's leading an
Yeah.
organization, which means there's a group of people with a diverse ideas and thinking and ways of doing things, that when you collectively get the group of people and those ideas, you're much better than one person. And so
Hmm.
I think the higher up you go, I have a gentleman I work with, and he has many mentors, and he'll actually reach out and ask all of us the same question. And it's typically, what do you think? How would you handle
Hmm.
this? And so I find sometimes if we're uncomfortable where to do next, seeking input from others to then take some small step. And that is an action when you go out and ask someone,
Hmm.
what do you think? Now, what happens is if you keep asking what you think and not take the next step of actually doing, then you're probably moving into what you call procrastination.
Yeah, but the fact that you've actually asked relieves a lot of the pressure, doesn't it? It tells you internally that you're not on your own, that there's somebody with you, and that gives you more confidence. I mean, if you think of an explorer who's totally on their own, they wouldn't get so far as if they had a little bit of support with them,
That's
because
right.
there's that issue of being on your own and being left out in the cold type of
And chances are someone is experiencing something similar. The only thing I would suggest to people is be careful. Sometimes when we reach out and ask for advice, people don't always give us the positive advice back. And so sometimes we have to reframe that.
Yeah, and this is another issue that comes with a leader who's surrounding himself with yes men. He's looking for impartial advice, and he's only going to get the yes man's advice, because that's what he surrounded himself with. So if that's the situation, then we need to go outside of that circle, don't we? We need to get impartial advice from others, like an executive coach like yourself or something else, because you haven't got any real skin in the game for the company. You're after supporting the leader, and you've got a much wider view, and you're not afraid to speak your mind and tell the truth as it is.
So that becomes the yes man syndrome is a real problem. And so how to break that pattern sometimes, because there are people that have the contrary thought, is is
Hmm.
to actually open up and say, okay, we're headed in this direction. Let's take the opposite view. Let's walk around and take what's the opposite view. Where if we went in the opposite direction, what would happen? And what are the
Hmm.
the pros and cons? Because each decision you make has its upsides and its downsides. And there are going to be things that are good about it, and there's also things that you're making some compromises. So in
Hmm.
taking that contrary position, invite the organization or the team that you're working with to say, let's look at a 360 view. Let's not just get enamored with one solution. And then sometimes it's just helpful to, if people are not really going to speak up because they've been so used to yesing, is to have a private like post-it exercise where people put their ideas on post-its, and you get enough ideas up that then it's not just one person saying it. It becomes on a flip chart a variety of different ideas. So those contrary ideas can start to surface in a safe way, whereas before there could be a tendency when someone brings up the opposite, someone says, oh no, that's not going to work, and then we've just shut down the very thing we need to advance the idea. Because again, we're in trying to go from point A to point B, that means that we haven't necessarily been on that journey, or we're trying to take that journey differently. And our confidence can get, or lack of confidence can get in the way and sabotage us and cause us to be less of. And then what we're really trying to do is, with our confidence, build enough confidence that lets us move there very powerfully, gracefully, quickly, and be able to sustain that.
So what other steps could leaders take then to help build the confidence, apart from recognizing that they've been there and they've faced similar situations? What other steps are there that you would advise them to take?
So I think the preparation and planning is really key. And what I find is people tend to be under the gun because they need to get results or do something pretty quickly, that they start to take steps, but there isn't a plan. And what I really find in a plan allows you to know where you are and have a pivot point. Because chances are with a plan, even if you have 10 steps in a plan, something's going to happen and you may need to backtrack. But if you've just headed off without the compass and the backpack, if you're going on a hike, or the map, and then you find yourself in the middle of the forest and you can't really see in any direction without that map or that plan, clearly, first of all, you're lost and your confidence will wane. So I think taking the time to prepare a plan helps you understand where you're going. At the same time, before that, I mentioned purpose. Because again, when we're in the middle of a change, we tend to lose why are we doing this again? Is this really worth it? So that purpose and that plan together is really helpful, because then as that self-talk, the negativity comes up, is this really going to work? Or our fears come up, we can go back and say, okay, what are we really trying to achieve? And here's where the plan, the direction we thought we would head, is it working or not? And what kind of micro adjustments do we need to make? So I think those...
Yeah, and this brings the analogy of driving and why people say the roadmap, you take a roadmap to go, because your purpose is your destination, isn't it? That's where you want to go.
That's where you...
And if you get in a car and you want to go to, let's say you want to go to Beijing, it's a hell of a drive, but if you don't have a map, you're not going to get there, because there's so many twists and turns along the way.
That's right.
So that map, that plan is really key.
The plan is key. And then I think, there's kind of the thinking part, there's the planning part, and then there's the action part. And then somewhere during that action, stuff comes up. Things come up. Obstacles that you didn't expect or anticipate do come up. And again, how do you handle that, think through that, is really important. So thinking positively, reframing the negative, looking at an obstacle or that challenge as an opportunity to enhance what you're doing is important. It's kind of like the old saying, not get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. And so I think part of that whole confidence issue is that we're afraid that we're going to get knocked down, and can we get up? Right? And so what I also find isn't talked about sometimes with confidence is there's this celebration along the way that builds confidence. And so often I find the folks I'm working with want to wait until they get to Beijing to then celebrate Beijing, instead of maybe every day celebrating, or that was a difficult turn in the road and we actually navigated that, where we stop to actually look at the view and see kind of where we are and where we've been and where we're headed. So those small celebrations along the way help to reinforce and build confidence for us to take the next step. and then the next step,
Yeah.
and the next step.
And they're also crucial for the team as well, aren't they? If you can have the little celebrations along the way, it keeps the team empowered, it keeps the team motivated because what we're doing is working, and they see that there's a good leadership behind them. So then there's more success, and more confidence in whatever's going to happen.
That's right. And so I spend a lot of time with leaders in celebration because again, we think of the big party, the big results, we found or achieved what we were going to achieve, but results happen all the time. We submitted the report. We actually found out that that's not going to work that way. The next two steps of the plan, the way we thought it was going to work, aren't going to work that way. That's actually, there should be a celebration because I see so many organizations.
That's a big success.
It's a big success because some organizations just, hey, those are the two steps we're taking next. We're going to take them. Even though more information's come up that says, not so good. So I think taking action has a lot of how do we build confidence and our mojo, so to speak, as we're taking action, or does it deplete us? And what I really like to work with leaders is how is the action, the small wins along the way, helping build energy and momentum so that when you arrive, people are arriving at the end result with energy to take on the next challenge. What I find so much is people arrive at the result and they arrive at the finish line and they're just exhausted and they collapse. And then, and again, that is probably not a confidence builder. It's, a confidence downer, so to speak.
Yeah, and if you don't have these little celebrations, then your energy just keeps getting drained. But if you have the celebrations, it boosts your energy, it lifts your energy, so you have more energy to do the next step and the next step and the next step. So it's a crucial thing, and it's a similar thing in life, isn't it? If you are studying, or you're learning maths, for instance, you get one little equation right, that gives you the confidence to take on the next one and the next one, and you keep doing those little successes. And then, there's no such thing as a problem because you've tackled all these things. You've succeeded so many times, so you can succeed again.
That's right. So then you can.
It's a psychological thing, isn't it?
Right. So you've kind of built your confidence step by step by step. And of course, in life these days, we want to take these big, huge leaps. And sometimes we're lucky and they happen, but for the most part, it is the steps along the way.
I think that's, it is the steps that give the big leaps. If you wanted to, I mean, you were a figure skater, a few years ago, and if you wanted to do, I can't remember, but these triple spins or pirouettes or whatever, you wouldn't start off by doing that.
No,
you'd have to build up to it, and you'd have to do the little bits and pieces, and then once you've got those, you'd have the confidence to do the full thing, the full movement.
That's right. But so often when people, and it's been decades since I skated, but I'll never forget. It's the first you'll need to learn how to skate forward and then backwards, and then using your edges, and then a small bunny hop to then a single jump to the double jumps to the triple. And it takes the practice in building the foundation from the ground up. And so as you build the foundation from the ground up, you're building the confidence that allows you to eventually land that triple axel.
Yeah, and in that process, you've got a destination and you've got a plan.
And you've got a plan
about where you're going.
And then you're also celebrating the small things along the way. And so what I find sometimes as a student or as a business person, we're just looking at the end game and how do we get to the end game. Yeah. And it's the steps along the way that help us build those experiences to know the patterns to then build things that we call confidence.
And sometimes I think that the steps are more important than the end game, aren't they?
They are. There's a lot of
because without those steps, you probably wouldn't get to the end game. So they are the key, really, to getting there.
The steps in between, the energy we expend every day doing the small things. It might be just how we write an email. It might be the conversations that we allow to have happen in a meeting. How are decisions made in the meeting. It's a huge step to building change. Are we allowing
Hmm.
people to share what's working and not working? Or do we just want to hear what's working?
Well, some leaders only want to hear what's working. They don't want to hear that what's not working. But again, that's limited vision, isn't it, really? Mm.
It
You know,
is.
you mentioned something earlier that on this journey to whatever the end game is, that sometimes things will happen. They'll come out of the blue, things that weren't planned for, weren't catered for. And is there anything specific that gives you or gives the leader the confidence to be able to tackle those? So he's not flawed, he's not stymied, despite the pressure that he's under or the timescale that's there for, this thing to be completed, whatever it is.
Yeah, so things do come up. And quickly something comes up, and I would invite people to hear what their internal talk is. Start to be aware of
Hmm.
that, because that internal talk, your emotions and what you're saying inside end up becoming the actions of what you carry outside. And
Hmm.
so it's one thing to start to say things come up, hey, deal with them. But we first have to deal with them and how we're processing them. So does a challenge come up, and do we start to have the negative talk like this isn't going to work? Oh, here we go again. Because we do over time build a consequence history of what works and doesn't work. Or when the challenge comes up, do we say, hey, here's an opportunity. What's going on? Let's assess the situation. What are the facts that we have? Um, what's really where we headed at this point? Where are we on our plan? Is the next step in our plan going to work or not? Who should I be talking to? Who should we be working with to work together? What kind of feedback do we really need to hear? And then being able to step ahead. So often what happens is something happens and then we just naturally react to that, versus what I like to say is the pause. And so what I
Hmm.
find is leaders move very fast, but they also move very slow. And so sometimes you have
Yeah.
to move slow to move fast. And that slow part is taking that in and saying, okay, what's going on now, and processing that information. And I think that's the
Yeah.
part that we don't talk about, because most leaders, you'd have to really, like, they don't sit and analyze that over time in their experiences. They've realized something happens, they need to take a deep breath and and assess the situation. They start by asking a lot of questions. Why is this? How come this happened? Where are we going? What happened? What are we trying to, what are our options? So those are great
Hmm.
things to start to bring inside and saying, okay, where are we? Is it, where do we want to head? What do we learn from this? What do we want to do about it, if anything? Because sometimes we don't even want to do something about it. It's just information.
Yeah. And, talking of information, I mean, obviously you've given us a lot of information and we can't drain everything out of your mind at the moment. And, if people need to or want to find anything else more about you, they can go to hilarypotts.com. Is that correct?
Yes, and I spell my name Hilary with one L, hilarypotts.com. My
Okay.
website,
So Hilary
yes, and
and Potts.
.com. That's correct.
Okay. And, talking the information, you've got one book already published, which I've got a copy of and I've read, and it's not only for leaders. I think I've told you before that I think that the advice in that book is so valid for anybody who's living, because as you say, change is always happening, and how do you get ahead and take on a new role and things like that. So it could be for someone who's a newlywed or someone who's got a new child or something, an aging parent or something like that. There's so much great advice there, and you're following that up with another book about change. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So thank you for the first book, the Executive Transition Playbook. And I wrote the book because the transition, the change, the confidence people need to step into a new role is pretty great. And there are some really good insights whether or not you're stepping into a leadership role. Typically, what I find then, a new leader comes in, and our job in business is to grow. And if we're going to grow, that means things need to change. And so how we handle the change is important. So there are some truths about change that we sometimes don't want to necessarily admit. And so I really want, from my decades of work with executives around the globe, both mega sized companies and small companies. There's some basic principles that I found have been really helpful with my clients and the people that I've served. And I want to share that with the world. So my forthcoming book will be called The Truth About Change, How to Show Up and Make Things Happen. Because how we show up, our actions as leaders, as individuals really matter on that continuum to going what I call from point A to point B. And so I look forward to sharing more on my website as I continue to write the book.
And when do you provisionally expect us to be able to get a copy of the book?
So I'm hoping the book will be out the spring of 2017.
Okay, so it's only a couple of months before it's going to be hitting the shelf.
It's a couple of months before it's being hitting the shelf. So sometime probably, my anticipated date is around May, June of 2017.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to that because, as I say, I've read the other one. I've been through it a couple of times, and the advice there is, as I say, it's for everybody. It's not just for executives, but it's really, really valuable advice. And, I've been told many times by people that if you read a book and you pick one thing up, it's worthwhile reading the book. It's more than worth the investment of the book. So I would advise everybody just to grab a copy of it, and I'll put a link to the book on the transcript so people can easily find it for themselves. And you had a special report or something that you wanted people to have the opportunity to get for free?
Yeah. So in addition to the book, by the way, is on Amazon, and it is available around the world. So you can find the book on Amazon. But those that really want to have a sneak peek of the book, and I also have a new leader success formula, go to my website, hilarypotts.com, and click on the executive onboarding tab. And in that tab has a variety of different tools about how to enter a new role. And again, in there, you'll see a formula, the new leader success formula. It's a document that you can download that gives you some of the key tools that are in my book. So either you can get my book on Amazon, or the new leader success formula is easy to download.
Well, I would suggest to get both.
That'd be great too. That'd be great too.
Because I think there's so much of a wealth of information that you have, obviously from your experience, et cetera, et cetera. But, you've put some of it in the book, and, people need help. We can't do everything on our own. And I think what a lot of people suffer from is, firstly, they don't know who to ask. And secondly, they're too proud, should we say, to ask. And they tend to fumble because of this. Whereas if they had a mentor or something like that who was there and they could just pick up the phone or send a quick email to, then they'd make so much more progress and they'd have a happier and a less stressful life.
So asking is a big deal, and it's a step towards building your confidence. And people want to share their experiences. So it starts with a question. How would you handle this? In your experience, what would you do? And again, then from there, our job is to listen. Just to listen to what someone has to say.
Mm-hmm. And, that question, some people would think it's a sign of weakness, but I would suggest it's actually a sign of strength asking the question.
That's right. It's a huge sign of strength. What I learned a long time ago, I was making a major change. It was my first job as a manager. And my bosses were just allowing me to kind of do what I needed to do. They were giving me the space. And I finally realized that I needed some help. And so I went to him and said, look, this is the first time I'm doing this. You've done this many times. Can I have your advice? And then for the next hour, he laid out a lot of really great advice. I couldn't, my pen was moving very quickly on the paper. But it was for me, he was going to let me continue to do what I needed to do and give me the space. And sometimes we would forget that sometimes we just have to ask, you've done this before, or do you have any ideas? And then to sit back and listen.
Yeah, and we can get locked up. I can remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5. I was, playing with a little bulb and a battery, trying to get it to work. But I was doing it in the dark because I wanted it to work in the dark, and I couldn't get it to work, and it was flickering every now and again, but it wouldn't work. Eventually, I had to go and ask, and because I was so set on making it happen, so stubborn, I wasn't taking the bigger picture. And that's where the advice came from. It is necessary. I went to my father and said, "How do I do this?" And he showed me. I thought, "Oh no, it's so easy."
Yeah.
And sometimes we blind ourselves because we're not asking. And when you go to somebody or you go to 2 or 3 people, you can pick the bits of advice and put them together in a fresh form, which makes something so much more powerful. And that's really something that people need to take on board, so they don't look at it, as I say, as weakness. They look at it as strength. A good, strong person will take the opinion of others, and that's important for people to really, really take on board.
So research has shown that the ideas from one person might be brilliant, but there are much better ideas when you look at the collective group. And so asking can be one of the first steps to to building your confidence, to stepping forward and being present and aware, hey, I don't have all the answers. But if I went out and asked, I would get maybe from 10 people, 10 different opinions, and be able to pick and choose what's the right path for today. And so starting by just asking the question. And my second piece, if you're going to ask the question, you need to be prepared to listen to the answer. You may not like the answers.
That's important.
Right? And that's okay. But stand in your own presence and say, okay, that person is giving me the best information that they have. And then you as the individual or the leader will take that kind of under advisement and just determine what the next steps are.
So if anybody wants to ask you anything, what's the best way to reach you? Through your website?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me is through hilarypotts.com. If you go to my contact page, you can submit your email, and there's ample space to write a question. And I do check my email. So that's probably the fastest and easiest way, wherever you are in the world, to contact me.
Okay, so everything is on your website. All the information they need, the download links, everything is on your website. So if they go to hilarypotts.com, they'll find all they need to know to be able to get whatever information that you can supply them with.
That's right. And I love hearing from people, and I love getting the questions. And if you read my book or take a look at something, I love having that feedback. What it does, it allows me to take in information and help others.
Okay, so I just checking the time, and I see it's getting a little bit late, and I know you've got a busy day ahead of you. I'm on the other side of the world, so it's getting quite late at night side here. But I don't want to keep you, from your day, and it's a Monday morning, which is not the best time. So I would just like to say thank you again for donating your time and your knowledge to everybody who's listening. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure that they do. You've come up with some wonderful, wonderful advice, and I'm going to take it on board, definitely. And, do you have any other last minute things to share with anybody, or?
So first of all, Stuart, thank you for just the conversation and having the opportunity to talk about a topic that I really find is important for us in today's world. We are so busy. From morning to night, people are putting in many, many hours. People are tired. And my suggestion is kind of to step back and find your presence, because with your presence, you're able to then pivot. And so much we're having these out of body experiences, or our mind and our body and our emotions are all kind of splayed all over the place. And sometimes it just helps to come back to who we are. And from there, we can build our mojo and our confidence and our plan to step forward. So thank you, Stuart, for asking me to come on your show today. And I look forward to future conversations.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. And as I say, you've been a great help to me and obviously to everyone who's listening. So, thank you again. And I'd just like to say, thank you to the listeners for paying attention and giving us the time to talk to you. So thank you all. And I'm looking forward to speaking to you on the next exciting episode of Confidence Bites, where we'll find more tips to start your week the confidence way. Okay, Hilary. Thanks for coming. Confidence Bites, your weekly confidence building show, was brought to you by Stuart Elliott from Double C Coaching, www.doubleccoaching.com, DOUBLECCCOACHING.com. For regular confidence building tips, subscribe to this channel today, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Stuart Double C, capital S T U A R T, capital D O U B L E, capital C, at Stuart Double C.